Sometimes the pressure you feel is not actually yours. It just sounds like your voice by the time you hear it. That is what makes this kind of pressure so difficult to recognize. Because after a while, it no longer feels external. It feels personal. Like it is coming from you. Like these are your own expectations. Your own standards. Your own urgency. But sometimes, that is not where it started. You are in a conversation and someone says something small. By now you should be further than this. You nod. Maybe you even smile. You move on. But later, you realize you have been carrying that sentence all day. That is how this kind of pressure often works. Not always through one huge moment. More through accumulation. Comments. Expectations. Assumptions. Things people say so casually, they do not even realize they are handing them to you. And over time, those things settle in. You start carrying them as if they are your own. That is where this becomes important. Because not all pressure belongs to you. Some of it was handed to you. Some of it was repeated around you often enough that it started to feel normal. Some of it was absorbed so early that you stopped noticing it as an influence at all. I think that is what makes this kind of pressure so heavy. It does not arrive labeled. It does not announce itself. It quietly blends into your thinking. Until one day, you are driving yourself with rules you never consciously chose. There are expectations you choose. And there are expectations you absorb. From family. From culture. From your environment. From what the people around you reward, praise, or quietly judge. From what is treated as normal. From what is treated as success. From what is treated as being behind. That matters more than most people realize. Because if you absorb those expectations without questioning them, they become pressure. And once they become pressure, they start shaping your internal world. You start feeling like you should be doing something, but you are not fully sure why. You feel urgency, but cannot clearly explain where it is coming from. You feel pressure, but it does not quite match what you actually want. That is a very strange feeling. Because part of you is moving, but another part of you is resisting. You are pushing, but not from alignment. You are pushing because something in you feels watched, measured, late. I have noticed that this can show up in very ordinary ways. You feel like you should want a certain kind of life, because it is what everyone seems to admire. You feel like you should be more ambitious in a certain direction, even if that direction feels empty to you. You feel like you should have reached a certain milestone by now, not because it matters deeply to you, but because you have heard it repeated so many times. And when that happens, the pressure feels personal. But it is often borrowed. That is such an important distinction. Because when the pressure is external, it often feels heavier than self-directed effort. Not because external pressure is automatically stronger, but because it is not aligned with your internal direction. So everything begins to feel forced. Like you are trying to move towards something that is not fully yours. And that is exhausting. You can feel that exhaustion when you keep trying to become the version of you that other people find easiest to understand. Or the version of you that looks more acceptable. Or the version of you that would finally stop certain comments, questions, or comparisons. That is not light pressure. That is deep internal friction. Because now you are not just trying to live. You are also trying to satisfy expectations you may not even believe in. And when those expectations conflict with what actually matters to you, your system feels it. Even if you cannot explain it clearly yet. That is often when life starts to feel strangely heavy. Not because you are doing nothing. Not because you do not care. But because your energy is being used to hold an internal split. One part of you wants one thing. Another part of you is trying to obey what has been placed on you. That creates tension. And over time, that tension starts to feel like your personality. Like you are just naturally stressed. Naturally behind. Naturally hard on yourself. But sometimes, you are not hard on yourself in isolation. Sometimes you are carrying a standard that was formed around you long before you examined it. That is why this question matters so much. Instead of asking, "Why do I feel so much pressure?" ask something more honest. Is this pressure actually coming from me? Do not rush that question. It is bigger than it sounds. Because the answer creates space. Space to separate what you want from what has been placed on you. Space to notice what you truly value and what you only inherited. Space to recognize where your urgency is coming from and whether it actually deserves to stay. That kind of space is powerful. Because once you begin to see the pressure more clearly, it starts to lose some of its authority. Not all at once, but enough to notice. Enough to realize that some of what has been driving you may not belong in your inner world anymore. And once that happens, something changes. The pressure becomes more defined, less vague, less merged with your identity. And because it is clearer, it becomes easier to decide what to keep and what to release. That does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you stop growing. It does not mean you reject all structure or expectation. It means you begin to choose more consciously. This matters to me. That does not. This is mine. That was handed to me. This pressure is aligned. That pressure is only noise. That is where clarity starts returning. Not because the world stops expecting things from you, but because you stop letting every expectation move into your inner voice without permission. That is a very different way of living. So if you have been feeling pressure, pause. It may not all belong to you. Some of it may have been spoken near you so often that you stopped noticing it as something separate. Some of it may have become familiar without ever becoming true. And once you begin to separate that, you begin to move differently, with more clarity, with less weight, with a little more room inside yourself. Sometimes the shift is not doing less. Sometimes it is finally recognizing which parts of the pressure were never yours to carry in the first place. And that may be where your relief begins.